In today's video, we're going to see if we can breathe some life into this $50 yard sale bike that one of my neighbors purchased. The previous owner and my neighbor were unable to get it running due to the bike just having too many issues. But that's kind of a good thing, because these issues needed to be addressed as soon as possible. And what you're going to see in this video further goes to beat down on the fact that you should really consider building your own bike if you want to get into this hobby. Or at the very least, purchasing one from somebody who has a good reputation for building these right. So apparently the previous owner took the term grease the bevel gears just a little bit too far and ended up packing this entire case with grease. I've never seen anything like this before, and needless to say, that's going to probably cause some clutch issues. I also noticed that the small bevel gear was slipping, so it wouldn't engage the motor at all. After cleaning off the grease, I noticed that the entire clutch assembly on the plate and the basket was covered in rust. I suspect the previous owner gave up on trying to get it to work and just left the cover off stored outside. I did my best to clean off the pads and pressure plate, but there was a lot of residue left over. This will be a little more interesting later in the video. I got a new woodruff key and the shaft was a little mangled, so I had to dress it up with a Dremel. After installing some Loctite on this screw so it doesn't fall back out again, we began to address other issues on the bike. His throttle was completely frozen. The cable was all rusted inside the housing, way too long, and had a lot of sharp bends. So we're going to see if we can fix this up. I eventually end up shortening the throttle cable, but for now, we're going to see if we can free it and get rid of the tight bends so we can test to see if this bike's even going to run. We also found the entire throttle assembly was loose on the handlebars. The previous owner didn't drill a hole for the set screw or use any kind of mounting tape, so we took care of that. At this point, the bike was nowhere near safe riding conditions, but I did want to see if I could get it started. We took it outside, it was dark, so I didn't record, and it did fire up, surprisingly, with a loose spark plug. It was in not even finger tight. I don't know how it even idled, but it did. So we're going to go ahead and dig into the motor because when I did test start it, it was making an awful sound. The head was really clean and the cylinder looked perfect. There was a little bit of carbon buildup on the piston, so it looks like the original owner did have it running at some point. Now that we know the motor will fire, we can go ahead and do more work to the bike since it looks like we're not going to be completely wasting our time. The chain was too long, so we're going to shorten it, and the master link clip was on backwards. This can sometimes cause them to pop off if they rub against the frame or inside the case. Unfortunately, the rear wheel has a broken spoke on the sprocket side, and the wheel bearings appear to be almost frozen, but I think I might be able to salvage them. They're sealed bearings, so I don't have replacements. I would also like to point out that the chain tensioner was so loose I could move it by hand. Had he gotten the bike running himself, it may have destroyed the entire rear wheel. This bike uses 700C road tires, which are not ideal for motorized bikes, but luckily my hotshot, the first build we ever did, was also a 700C, and parts from that bike have given life to other builds, so it's nice to salvage. One nice little surprise about this bike is it uses a thick rear axle due to the sealed bearings. This is going to be a lot harder to bend and very nice for a motorized bike. But unfortunately, some of the threads on that axle are mangled, so if we can't make it work, we're dead in the water. These bearings were pretty chunky and covered in rust, despite being sealed bearings, so this must have sat outside in some severe thunderstorms. We cleaned them up best we could and rinsed them off camera in mineral spirits. Thankfully, due to the generous amount of clean grease still in the clutch cover, we were able to use his grease for all the bearings. After removing the clutch cam cover, surprisingly, there was grease on the bevel gear, so we're just going to clean it up and re-grease it. There's no issues here because the bike barely ran, so these are practically brand new. After shrinking the bearings in the freezer for a little while, we got them back in. It was a tight fit, and they ran better, but not great. A lot of the chunkiness was gone, but still not what I like. Now the biggest problem with this rear wheel is it's a 32 spoke wheel, and this means that it does not line up with the rag joint adapter, or even a clamp on if that's your style. Most bikes will use 36 spokes, and that lines up great. But I've dealt with this before, and it simply means that you have to bend a few of the spokes around the bolts and then retrue the rear wheel. By some miracle, the front wheel was in almost perfect shape. It was pretty true, the wheel bearings were properly adjusted, greased, and they ran smooth. The only thing we really had to address here was the brakes. I repositioned both the levers to a more convenient location, but the brakes were sticking and out of adjustment, causing them to rub on the wheels. Luckily for me and him, these style of rim brakes are by far my favorite. They're the easiest to adjust and line up. After having addressed all the obvious issues, I start by giving the bike a quick wipe down. This isn't just to clean it up for him, but it's to look for anything I might have missed, as it's easy to find issues when you're cleaning a bike. I convinced him to leave the bike with me for at least 2 days. As many of you know, it's uncommon for even a new build to be put together and run with perfection. They usually need adjustments after the first couple of rides, and this bike is certainly no exception. The bike made a pretty awful rattling sound, which I suspect were the rusted out clutch basket bearings. The carburetor leaked, and it had a high idle. I suspect either the dirty carburetor and or an air leak. We're going to go ahead and just replace this carburetor because his priming bulb had pretty much melted itself in the gas. And since I have so many of these, there's no loss to me. We're going to put a JRL model on it with an O-ring, since these are really good carburetors right out the box and need very little adjustment. A common and extremely annoying problem. Well, she gets barely started. Come on, you piece of garbage. The clutch was slipping so bad I could barely start the bike. I naturally assumed there was a problem with the pin inside the collar. What I didn't realize is that the ball bearings had completely come out of the basket, making it so that the pressure plate couldn't push down fully on the clutch pads. So we're just going to go ahead and replace this entire basket with some fresh pads anyways, because the old ones were slathered in grease. We went ahead and did further examination on the motor while we were at it, taking the cylinder off, and it looks pristine. Normally I would do some port work to this, but he doesn't need all that. It's clean enough as is. But it does have an air leak, or at least I suspect it does. And since we've solved the issue with the carburetor, adding an O-ring to the intake, I went ahead and replaced the base gasket, which did help. The motor is running much better, but still not perfect. I'm just out of time. Hooked him up with a little to-go bag here. I don't use this anymore. I had it on the path dragon a long time ago, with a couple of spare parts for on the side of the road stuff. That's this hand pump I don't use anymore because I got an electric pump. Spark plug tool, 1 tank's worth of 2-cycle oil, a multi-tool. It's even got a 10mm in there, a whole bunch of bits and Allen keys. There's another multi-tool in here that's also got a pair of pliers, a knife, tire tools to pop them off the rim, and somewhere in here, a tire repair kit. You can actually repair your inner tube without taking the wheel off the bike in most situations, as long as you can pop the side of the wheel off the rim and pull the inner tube out and find the hole. You don't have to actually take a wheel off the bike to fix it. So hopefully this will have him set in some situations. Once he arrived, I gave him what's basically a crash course in motorized bikes. What to expect for adjustments, how to ride the bike, accepting its limitations, and overall care and maintenance. The best I can do in about a 30-minute talk. As many of you know, the important bit of information can't be gained until you actually dig into the bike yourself and start riding it. And that's going to be up to him. He's going to have to learn the rest on his own. And of course I'll help him whenever I can. But it's going to be the same situation for many of you. Until you actually build your own, there's a lot you're not going to know about these bikes. Most importantly, I explain that he should ride the bike safely and get a good feel for it before he gets carried away. These bikes are mainly hobbies, and I explain that they're not known for their reliability, especially considering the condition the bike was in when it arrived. Because of this, I gave him my contact information and told him that I'd help him with any issues on the bike whenever I could. And to my surprise, 4 days later, to the best of my knowledge, the only issue he's had so far is a popped front tire. So I'll consider that a win in my book. Now, no helmet for his first test ride, but I have a unique way of getting people to wear a helmet. I simply inform them that if the police see them riding a motorized bike without a helmet, they're probably going to get a ticket. This usually does the trick, because not getting a ticket will tend to beat not looking cool any day of the week. And if that's the trick I have to play to get someone to ride safe, then so be it. What you're about to see is literally his first time ever riding a motorized bike. This is his first one. And considering that, he did pretty good. He even knew, naturally, how to operate the clutch, pulling it in, usually, whenever coming to a stop or when getting off the throttle. When I notice a rider can quickly figure these small things out on their own, it gives me a good feeling that they'll be able to stick with the bike for quite some time. When all is said and done, it's still my opinion that if you're interested in one of these gas-powered motorized bikes, it's best if you build it yourself. Many of the issues that have been scattered upon different bikes throughout the past 5 years of my experience in this hobby all came together on this one build. Not just the knowledge needed to get the bike up and running, but the information required to inform the user of the bike's limitations. Much like this individual, it's very easy for someone to be tempted to pick one of these bikes up on a whim at a yard sale or online from somebody who just gave up on them. At a glance, you don't really see all the issues. It's not until you dig into the bike and actually find out how deep this rabbit hole can go. It's my hope that by continuing to run this channel, new builders who find themselves in a similar situation will find the knowledge they need to overcome these issues, or at the very least, understand exactly what they're getting themselves into. I did my best to make sure that this bike would run as reliable as possible with what I had to work with, but more importantly, be safe. At the very least, I hope that he'll be able to get his $50 worth of enjoyment and usefulness out of this bike before requiring further modifications. I understand that by helping this individual for free, I opened a door of unofficial obligation. But I'm honestly okay with that, so long as you don't open that door to too many people and get overwhelmed. This was a challenge for me, and it was a chance to learn something new that might come in handy in the future. For me, if not for others. I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.